go. Hello, hello. Welcome everyone to the October edition of Deep Talks. It's so nice to see you all out tonight. It's great to be here, of course, with the beautiful fall weather in Lead. We have a wonderful talk coming up tonight. Our 2025 artist in residence, Chris Combs, is going to tell us all about his awesome artwork. He's going to get to reveal some artwork for the first time in public tonight, which is going to be pretty exciting. So that's going to be awesome. It's so wonderful to see so many people out here. Of course, Deep Talks happens every month here at Surf, and we need to thank our sponsors, the folks who provide all this free food, free beverages that make all this possible. That includes Chris Mitchell with Edward Jones and Spearfish, RCS Construction in Rapid City, Chuck and Jolene Lichtenwalner, who have been supporters of Deep Talk since 2019, and Crow Peak Brewing and Spearfish. They've been supporters of Deep Talks now in their 11th year. Let's give a round of applause to all of those awesome sponsors who make this happen every month. Our next Deep Talks on November 6th is coming up, so mark that in your calendars. We're going to go live from the Black Hills State Underground Campus. We'll be able to ask some questions directly to scientists and researchers there, which is going to be a lot of fun. But Chris Combs is, of course, tonight, and I want to also mention that his art gallery show, if you want to see all of his art, is opening on October 7th down at Black Hills State Campus there at the Rudell Gallery. So everybody should be able to find that online and know where it is. That's going to be a really great time on Tuesday evening there on the 7th. We hope to see you all out. But without further ado, I'm going to get out of the way and turn it over to our 2025 Artist in Residence, Chris Combs.
Cool. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge how incredible this opportunity is. This world-class daily operating research facility invites a random artist in to hang out with physicists and engineers and technicians and everyone else who makes the facility possible. They invited me in and said, you can ask questions and you can look at stuff. Hey, what do you want to go see? There's nothing like it. I'm really grateful. I really appreciate this opportunity to be at the Sanford Underground Research Facility for a whole month, and then I got to go back home to my studio and make a big mess for 2 months and make a bunch of art, and I hauled it all back out here. So I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about the artwork that I've made, but I should probably start just a little bit of stuff about me, just so you're like, who is this guy? So here I am sitting in the long baseline neutrino facility. Amazing photo, thank you. There's my website if you want to pull it up, chriscombs.net. Here's a little bit about my history. So previously, I studied photojournalism, which is to say taking photos for the news, still photos. It was a lot of fun. I then became a photo editor working at National Geographic News, which is where I first learned about what the heck a neutrino detector is. And for that matter, what's a neutrino? I saw these amazing photographs and I was immediately captivated of these huge underground vessels that contain just countless shiny photomultiplier tubes and people in the middle of them servicing them, and just the idea of having something buried so deep underground reporting on the cosmos really spoke to me, and I've kept that somewhere in my head ever since. That was a while ago. Since then, I did some other web stuff, worked in media companies, started making artworks after learning electronics as a hobby. Because when I was a kid, I wanted to learn robots, and my dad, who might be on the stream tonight, got me this amazing Radio Shack book by Forrest Mims. It's a classic of what is an electron? What are atoms? How does this all work? It was a little much for me at the time. I was a little young. I kind of bounced off of it. But these days, there's a lot more material on the internet, and so I've been learning electronics for the past 12 years using the same materials that children learn with in STEAM classes. So like these little educational computers, Raspberry Pis, Arduinos, I've been learning off the same stuff as a grown-up artist. And so I use them to make sculptures that have buttons and screens and change by themselves over time, or you can press the buttons. That's really fun. I'm based in Washington, DC, and I have a studio at Otis Street Arts Project, graduate of the Corcoran College of Art and Design, RIP. And let me just show you a few kind of past works, just to give you a little sample of why they picked me, I guess, but also where I'm coming from and some of the opportunities that I had in the past. So this piece here is called Elysium, and you should be seeing a field of grass, still photo, grass in a wooden frame with this mesh grid over it. And the mesh grid is actually in kind of bad shape, right? And there's a bit of a twig poking through part of it. And this is actually a video screen. The artwork itself shows this grass waving. And I was thinking of it as just this thing that is beautiful and seems just out of reach, but the wire grid is not actually all that strong of a barrier. and the tree that grew through it and outlasted the wire might be, evidence of that. Another piece, this is the next big thing, which was a temporary installation, 12-foot homage to Hokusai's Great Wave off Kanagawa, which you may have seen on some tote bags or plenty of other household goods. It's a famous, amazing woodblock print made with, I'm gonna get the number wrong, but 17 layers woodblock print, just a huge number, a beautiful print. And so I remade it with e-waste. And these are actually network cables, and so it is a working network. And it has on the screen, on the board here, it has a bunch of small screens, but also small computers that talk with each other about you, because they're watching you. And there's also some boats made of bubble mailers, thinking about product design. Here is a public artwork that I had just recently installed in Southwest Washington, DC. So this is permanent, it's outside, it's in an apartment complex. They're big 8-inch steel pipe, which I don't actually know how to work with, so I partnered up with a welder dude and Stephen Jones, and he did amazing work just building these artworks for me physically, and then I put an electronics cartridge in it. And it has a bulbous screen in it. The screen shows natural scenes. You're looking at it in the context of an apartment building in Washington, DC. You might not be thinking there's a lot of natural world around me, so these scenes might seem far away, but the conceit is that they were all filmed within 10 miles of that site by me. So I found a green heron stalking its prey. It is possible to find wildlife in Washington. And then this piece is called Pollination. It's a flower-shaped piece made out of telecommunications hardware. So DIN rail, terminal blocks, and it's got a bunch of little computers, and they all talk to each other, also looking for you and trying to turn your face. If it sees a face, it turns your face into a flower by repeating it symmetrically. And it also listens to your speech, which is a little creepier. And then this piece is called Insert 25 cents to feel something. So this is me taking an industrial cabinet that was used for some really oily machine, I'm not sure what, and cutting some holes in it and then painting some lettering on it in my homage to a Boardwalk Classic machine called the Relaxolator, which is this thing you step on, you put a nickel in, and it jiggles your feet. So I thought that was a pretty interesting machine. I borrowed its lettering for this one. And what happens if you do pay a quarter, it does have a working coin slot. You put a quarter in and it shows you a cat picture, and then it sings you a song with meowing. So I don't necessarily take myself all that seriously, which seems like a good segue to stop talking about me and move on a little bit here to my time at this amazing facility. So the Sanford Underground Research Facility, everyone in the room I'm sure knows what it is, but there are also people joining us online. So I just want to talk really briefly about what this is and where we are in Lead, South Dakota. So right out the window here is the open cut, which is the top visible part of a 370-mile long drift system of former gold mine, the Homestake gold mine. And it has since been turned into a research facility. That white building on the left-hand side here is basically the top of the elevator, if you will. Those are not the right terms, but might help with the analogy. An elevator that goes down 5,000-ish feet. The elevator takes 10 to 12 minutes. The other one's a little faster, maybe 5-6 minutes, something in there. And so this is just a little sort of cross-section of a portion of the facility. So again, the open cut that you just saw in the last photo is this former mining area here where rock is being dumped. There's the shaft that goes down, not to scale, it goes way down, and then it meets up with a detector, which we'll talk a little bit more about shortly. This image here on the right is a photo from inside the elevator, if you will, showing what the ride is like. It's a little bit cozy. This was not too many people that day, maybe 10, but you can fit up to 30 in it. And just a little bit more of just what it's like to be in the facility. So this is a hallway on the left here, adrift. It's got minecart tracks in the ground. Everyone's wearing high-vis safety gear because it's really important in a working facility like this to wear safety gear, and everyone needs to comply with proper safety procedures at all times. That's no joke, it really isn't. I learned a lot doing this. But I got to figure out how to put on a hard hat and wear high-vis coveralls and wear all this stuff at all times while underground, which I was able to do a couple times a week. It's an amazing gift. It takes a lot of work to get underground. There is a lot of coordination involved. And you need a lot of people to know who's down there and what, if something goes wrong or, there's some miscommunication, whatever happens, you got to get people back out. So it's very important to communicate at all times about who's down there. So this on the right here is just sort of a typical view of one of the sort of areas moving around between detector facilities, I believe. And then this here on the left is a particle accelerator called Caspar. It's not the biggest particle accelerator, but it's there. And it's used to do amazing experiments. And on the right is a partial view of a clean room that was being relocated at the time of this photo. I got to go in a clean room. What? And it's full of lead bricks at this time, which were just being hauled around by research students. An incredible amount of labor and maybe some other staff too. Wild facility, really cool being there. There were also some other areas that were no longer in use as scientific facilities, but that I enjoyed being able to see tagging along with the safety team as they did an inspection along a route. So this here on the left, you might be able to make out that the sign says danger open hole. So 370 miles of former gold mine. Like, there are a lot of drifts. It's wild. In this room, I'm standing near a scale model that shows you just a cloud of what the tunnels and drifts are like, not tunnels, drifts, and the lifts and all the different ways to get around. It's just an incredible, huge facility. About 12 miles, I think, are currently actively used for science. There's also a bunch of surface buildings from the former gold mine days, the Homestake gold mine. So this here on the left is the former gold foundry where, as I understand it, gold bricks were melted down. And then the gold was transported back to what is now the conference rooms at the Sanford Underground Research Facility, but are the vaults. Like, there's vault doors on the conference rooms because that's where the gold bricks were stored. And this here on the right is another view from outside that facility. It was an incredible opportunity to just see both the past and the present, to see the state of the art of these detectors and also what was here and what Homestake meant to this community and how many people it supported and how many people SURF continues to support. Really a remarkable series of stories for someone who's interested in technologies, because these are all about technologies and the ways that we shape the world and the world shapes us. And here's a little bit more of a view. We're going to be talking a little bit more about this later on, but this here on the left is a view with the Davis McCall scholars of the football field size, one of the three-ish long baseline neutrino facility caverns as it's being excavated. On that day, they had the lights out, which was beautiful and chilling and weird to be in a facility in a cavern so big that your headlamp does not illuminate the other end. It was wild. And this here on the right is a blast door. From when the blasting was being done, you need blast doors to constrain the shockwave of the explosions. And even with blast doors, it still was affecting some of the experiments. I think that's why Caspar had to relocate. So a lot of interesting large-scale logistics problems. And so I'm just going to show you a little bit of the artwork that I made out of all of this inspiration and all this material and all these stories and all these people. But I can't help but also dig into neutrinos a bit, because my show is really kind of about neutrinos, which is just one of the areas of research being done here at the lab. But it's a really interesting area, and so I'm going to try to weave that in throughout so that you get to see some pictures, then we talk about some crazy physics stuff, and then we go back to some pictures, because I personally like to see some visuals while imagining these unimaginably tiny things. So this first artwork here is called the Hyperkinetic Resource Allocator. This is a machine. I made it, but I used some sort of prefabricated parts. So there's like a metal case here that I put my own front on. It has 3 sliders on it, and they are labeled the following: charismatic megaprojects, incremental tedium, and wildcards. So what the heck does it do? It shows different channels of video. They're each using bright colors, so cyan, magenta, and yellow. And they're just kind of overlaid based off of where you put the sliders. It's fun, and one of the fun things about making this kind of art is I can say, hey, you can touch the art. It's fun, go ahead. So if you come see this show on Tuesday forward, you get to move the sliders, it's a lot of fun. Get to touch the art. And this is what I made it out of. This was a power supply. I think it was a prototype level instrument, because there were like maybe 5 of them that I could find that were made. But it was made using letraset. Anyone in the room know what letraset is? Anyone, anyone, anyone? One, Brills, thank you. Letraset was a method of lettering, is a method, if you can find them, of lettering things that's a transfer film. And you would buy a sheet with all of the letters of a font and a given size of the font, and you'd press it onto a thing. So this machine on the left, someone laboriously put the I and the N and the S, and I think they made as many of these machines as their one sheet of letraset could do. Like, honestly. Because as far as I can tell, there were about 5 of them made. Lovely machine, high voltage power supply, totally dead. So, you know, people who know electronics are often faced with this conundrum. Do I repair the thing, or do I transmogrify the thing? And these days there are a lot of cool things that you can put into old devices and give them new life in a new internet era where they can be online devices. Those are kind of fun, and I think of that as sort of like enchanting objects. Like, you can take a beautiful old cathedral radio and turn it into an internet radio or a Spotify speaker or whatever else you want. I think that's a really fun process, and so I kind of do some of that with my artworks. So this power supply was totally dead. I ripped the front off and made my own here. This is a laser cut acrylic piece here. I laid it out in Illustrator for people who know that software, laser cut it, filled it in with a little bit of paint. And then here's a little close-up of what the screen is. And so the 3 channels I mentioned are a little bit sort of like, what? 3 channels of what? Like charismatic mega projects? What does that look like, right? Like, okay. But what they are videos that I filmed within the surf facility and surrounds that to me speak to these ideas. So I mentioned that we were in the caverns for the long baseline neutrino facility, the future Dune cavern. We were in that room with just our headlamps illuminating it. And I filmed some of that, and you can see the headlamps illuminating the walls and then just fading off to black. And if you take that footage and turn it, wild colors like this, it turns out to be kind of a fun visual overlaid with all these other subjects. So I use that to stand in for charismatic mega projects, this enormous cavern being constructed for an even more enormous instrument, along with things that stand in for incremental tedium, bless it. That's the way that a lot of research gets done, right? And also the wild cards. And all these things were inspired by a setup pub talk, pub trivia night actually, where there was a fun exercise where we were given an amount of budget and a bunch of fake proposals. Which ones would you fund? Would you fund the incremental tedium or the wild cards or the charismatic mega projects? I loved that idea, so I made an artwork out of it. So this is all kind of, a lot of it had to do with the neutrino facility, which I think this makes a good moment to kind of talk a little bit about neutrinos just for people online or people who haven't been as tuned into what that is. But this is artist grade physics, okay? So I didn't study physics. I got to go through art school without taking physics, which at the time was a blessing and now is a bit of, so I'm learning a lot. I've been learning a lot. Physics are wild. And so I'm just gonna share with you sort of my understanding of what neutrinos are. They will be 90% right. If it's more than 10% wrong, please let me know. So neutrinos are teeny tiny. These are particles that are smaller than an atom. Smaller than an atom. You hear an atom and you think, that's tiny. Yeah, it gets way smaller. So they're at such a small scale that you can't even really assign them scale. We don't have any way of measuring them. Who knows? They're tiny, tiny, tiny. They shoot through atoms. Neutrinos shoot through atoms. Like it's no big deal. They just pass right through them. A neutrino, a single neutrino could pass through a light year of lead without hitting any of the lead atoms. Lead is incredibly dense, right? So it can just pew straight through that. They're almost massless. We thought for a while they had no mass whatsoever, but I think the understanding now is they do have a tiny bit of mass, but they don't have an electric charge, so you can't really like move them around really easily. Ish. So there are 100 trillion of them passing through your body every second. At least that's the fanciest stat I heard. I've heard a couple different numbers. I think this is the newest one. 100 trillion. So 100 million, then billion, then trillion. That's a lot of neutrinos every second. They come from stars. They come from fusion. They come from fission. They come from nuclear decay, like things like uranium just breaking down. They come from supernovas. They're actually shot out of supernovas just before we have any other sign of a supernova exploding. That's pretty wild. Like a little lead warning on an enormous star blowing up. Cool. And they also came from the Big Bang. I find this completely wild. There are neutrinos knocking around the universe right now from the Big Bang. Like a 14 billion year old neutrino. And they're just passing through us like it's no big deal. They've never hit any atom ever. So I find that really interesting and inspirational. So if you have this thing that doesn't care about matter, we kind of care about matter. Everything we have is matter. All the things we make and use are matter. How the heck do you know that they exist? Or how would you ever sense that they are really there? And the solutions to that question are incredible. And I really have a cursory understanding of them. But I'll share what I've been finding out. Let me also just share a little bit of how they were imagined. Before anyone understood how you could detect even a trace of them ever, Wolfgang Pauli, physicist, wrote to his colleagues in 1930 saying, "My dear radioactive ladies and gentlemen," which is how he wrote to his colleagues studying the atom and nuclear physics. He proposed what he termed in German a desperate remedy for some math problems in the standard model, conservation of energy. He was like, well, I think maybe there's just a thing. We don't really know what it is, but this thing probably exists, and it explains all the math. Also, I can't come to that conference I was going to come to. I'm sending an emissary. They'll explain everything, and also I have to go to a ball of bye. That actually happened. So Wolfgang Pauli wrote this letter to his radioactive ladies and gentlemen about a desperate remedy. Here's just a snip of a letter. You can look it up. It's fabulous. I recommend reading it. How on earth would we ever spot these things that were imagined so long ago? They were detected first maybe like 25 years ago, somewhere in there in the 50s. But there have been a bunch of kind of interesting methods of detecting them. One of them happened right here. The Homestake experiment was situated in the then operating gold mine, the Homestake gold mine. Two physicists said, we think we can make this detector, and we expect that it will detect a certain number of neutrinos. Can we have some office space in your gold mine? And they got it, and they built this thing. And this is, I think, Ray Davis Jr. standing in it. And this is an enormous tank that was later filled with dry cleaning fluid, which then reacted with neutrinos. If a neutrino should happen to hit one of the atoms in it, that atom would somehow turn into a helium atom. And they detected 40 helium atoms over the run of the experiment. 40 atoms. I don't know how you detect 40 atoms of anything. That is an imaginably small number. It's not a whole lot, 40 atoms. But they did. They detected 40, but they expected to detect about 3 times as many. And the reason for that is interesting too. It turned out there were 3 different kinds of neutrinos, and this detector only worked for one of them. But that wasn't found until 35 years later. And it won Ray Davis a Nobel. It's a whole wild saga in and of itself. Another method of detecting neutrinos is detectors that have photomultiplier tubes in them. This is not one here. This is a cool looking one elsewhere in the world called Super K. But each of these things is like a sensor that can pick up a single photon hitting it. And under some conditions, if a neutrino hits super cooled liquid in a big tank underground, it emits a single photon, and that photon can get detected by a photonic detector. And these are those. And there's something sort of like that here at the Lux Zeppelin detector, which is designed to detect dark matter, but accidentally also detects a bunch of neutrinos, as I understand it. And I just have to dip a little tiny bit into a visual here from Randall Munroe, a fabulous science-obsessed cartoonist who does a lot of stick figures, and as such, speaks to my level of being able to draw. Normal astronomers look at the sky by going on top of a mountain. Neutrino astronomers dig deep. And so I enjoy this metaphor of looking at the cosmos by digging deep. The reason that the lab is 4,850 feet underground is because dirt is really good at filtering out stuff that isn't neutrinos. Like, we're constantly being bombarded by cosmic rays and other confusing things from the heavens. And the dirt does a good job of filtering that stuff out. But if you go deep enough, then you just get neutrinos. So that's my artist level explanation of neutrinos and why detectors are so far underground. And there's a really interesting experiment being made right now here at the Sanford Underground Research Facility called DUNE, where a particle accelerator in Chicago, 800 miles away, is going to shoot a beam of neutrinos through the crust of the Earth at the giant detectors that are being built in that huge cavern I showed you earlier. So they're going through 800 miles of the Earth to see what happens. And the reason for that is that neutrinos change by themselves kind of randomly, I think, but it's probably not random, right? They change through reasons and mechanisms that I don't think are fully understood. And they change between those 3 flavors. It'd be like if you were bringing home like a gallon of vanilla ice cream, and on the way home in your car, it turned into strawberry. And you're like, what? What happened there? Neutrinos do that. They change between their flavors kind of at random. This is the facility, the big cavern I mentioned. And then one of the other interesting things about the neutrino problem is that they might explain why matter exists at all. Because if you go way back to the Big Bang, there were equal amounts of antimatter and matter in theory. So they should have all annihilated each other. Like, all of these, these particles should have annihilated each other. But they didn't. Matter won out. There's a little more matter, a vanishingly small amount. And it's thought, my understanding is that it is thought that neutrinos might be the difference, because the way that neutrinos decay is slightly different from the way that antineutrinos decay. And so neutrinos might explain why we exist at all, why matter made it, instead of just all getting pyrrhically annihilated. So I find all that kind of interesting. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's sort of looking for tiny things that are so small you can't even really imagine them. And I wanted to make an artwork that just kind of embodies visually what it's like to look at something really, really small. And so this is a magnifying glass. It's a pretty small magnifying glass, actually. It's maybe like this big, 3 inches. And the screen that it's showing is a 1/2-inch screen. Tiny, tiny, tiny. And you have to crane around to look at it. And it's showing you a message if you do get to look through the magnifying glass. It shows you the following text. What is it like to seek something unfathomably small? Perhaps doing so is a way of acknowledging your own tininess at the scale of the universe. So this artwork is just, it's a very small thing. And in a way, I just wanted to encapsulate what it's like to be seeking something so tiny. And this artwork is also kind of reflecting directly on neutrinos. It's about how neutrinos change flavors between 3 different flavors, kind of unpredictably. We don't really know why they do it. It's a black box to us. So here's a photo of it. It's inspired by a pachinko machine, but I thought it might actually be a little more fun to not look at a slide of it, but to actually look at it in real life. Sound good? Everyone want to see it? Cool. So I'll advance a little bit. This screen here shows you some of the details on it, and I'll show you what the machine actually looks like. So here we are. This is the astonishing oscillator. This is a pachinko machine-ish, inspired by pachinko. It isn't a gambling device. I should say that. We're not doing gambling. No gambling. But what it does is when you take a ball from one of the 3 pans at the bottom and insert it at the top, it will change to one of those 3, but you don't know which one because it's completely opaque to you. And so it emerges from one of the 3 at the bottom. I really wanted to make something that embodies this idea of something changing mysteriously. And for me, having a pachinko machine kind of did the trick. So this is something that I fabricated. I'll talk a little more about the process, but this is something that I made whole cloth. It's all plywood that was laser cut, and I drove a lot of nails. I think it was 3 hours just for the nails. And then it has some text on it that's sort of set in an era where you might be buying home pachinko machines instead of going somewhere to use one. So it says, the astonishing oscillator, subatomic novelty. And in the top middle is an illustration of Fermilabs in Chicago, where this neutrino beam is coming from. And in the middle at the bottom-ish, there's a drawing of the head frame, the Yates head frame here, symbolizing how the neutrino beam will end up at Dune in Surf. And it also has some text that says, select your spherical fermion, unleash it into the upper chamber. As what does it emerge? And I think I decided that the company should be Particular Novelties from Leeds, South Dakota, patent pending. Why not, right? So here's how I make this kind of thing. I lay it out very poorly in some artist-grade CAD software, some layout software for 3D stuff. I use a free web one called Tinkercad because I can, and you can too. It's free. Get after it. I drew the buildings and then laser etched them. This tool is a little harder to find, but a laser cutter can cut planes of wood or other kind of like carbon-based things. It can cut them and also etch them a little bit. So I used it to etch the artwork a little bit into them, which I then filled in with waxes and paint. And here's a little bit of that process. So I had spray painted the sort of base gradient and then laser cut it. And so that put in, I did pre-drill some holes for myself because I am lazy. And I did not want to have to hammer all the nails all the way. So I pre-drilled some holes for that. And then etched the art. And that, I had also covered it in this tape, like a big masking tape roll, and I used the etching to kind of punch through the masking tape. So then when I sprayed it with spray paint, the paint only went in the etched parts and left silver behind. And you can see here on the right, the sort of raw machine, how it's just unfinished plywood. It's brand new Baltic birch. It's not an old machine. But hopefully it looks a bit old. And I also grimed it down. One fun thing in my world is making things look filthy. And we'll talk a little more about how that works with this artwork. So this is, I'm gonna get this wrong. I apologize to German speakers in the room. The Ungenauigkeit 01. This artwork has 2 gauges. They move at random. When the knob is set in the middle, they move at random. When you move the knob to one side, that needle stabilizes and you can read its value, but the other one goes even crazier. And then if you go the other way, it stabilizes that one, and then this one goes wild. So I don't know, maybe this speaks to some sort of base principles of physics. I'll let you all mull that while we talk process for a moment. This is an industrial box. Where do I get industrial boxes? All kinds of places. Surf was gracious enough to let me use some old materials that were discarded from their operation, from the Homestake operation. We'll talk a little about more of that too, a little more about that too. But I also sometimes just buy them from industrial surplus sellers on the internet. So I bought 3 grimy old boxes from eBay, and they came. And it looked like this. So it comes with a lot of stuff on it. It was used in a factory or something. I'm not sure what. But since I don't know what that grime is, I kind of need to remove it. So I don all my PPE, get my big gloves, and then a whole bunch of Dawn dish soap, and just get as much of that stuff off as I can. Because again, we don't know what it was. We don't know what this was used for. The eBay guy probably doesn't know either. So I clean it all off. And then I cut some holes in it. That hole saw, I do not recommend. You can see the diameter of it. It's maybe like, maybe 2.5 inches or something like that. Yeah, 60 millimeters. Not recommended. Use a better hole saw. But it did work. I got the holes. Lots of PPE with that one. And then I installed these parts. So I bought some voltmeters that were round and attractive, but also kind of a little bit, if you look at them closely, they're a little bit cheap and plasticky. And then the knob I got from the Spearfish Restore. I think it's an oven knob. I don't know, maybe it looks familiar. I don't know. And so then I grimed it up. And what does grinding mean? I have colored waxes, and I put the colored wax on there with like a paintbrush and a rag, and then smear it all up. And it looks really dirty, right? I think that's actually a little too dirty. So I took it back off. And the way that you clean something that you've artfully grimed up is you just clean it. You get like, spray cleaner and some paper towels or a rag, and just take off most of it. I think we all know what it's like to mostly clean something. And that works well for artworks. Because you don't really want to be like grossing out galleries. You don't want someone to touch something and have their finger come back a different color. Not ideal. So I cleaned most of the grime back off. And then I'm just going to flip back and forth between these two a couple times. So I painted on some details on those cheap looking meters. So let me go back again. So they're all black and flat, and it looks plasticky, right? But then if I use a shiny silver marker to paint on some faux metal, suddenly it looks a little more like metal, like how I imagine this machine would have really been built. And so I added a little bit more detail on, put some top coat on, and then added the nameplate. So I am lucky enough to have a CNC router, which is a small, messy machine that is cantankerous, and the one that I have probably isn't, quote, that good, but it gets good enough for me. And so I laid out a label for this machine. It says Heisenberg Machine Works in Copenhagen, Netherlands, and some other stuff, a serial number plate that I didn't fill out. To my mind, this idea of being able to pin down one thing and having the other one go wild is kind of like Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, which is this idea that you can learn either, speed or I don't know. There's a couple different combinations you can do. Velocity, help. Physicists, help. Yeah. Yes. Velocity and position. Thank you. Blanking out up here. Position and velocity. You can pick one or the other, but you can't know both with certainty. I found that compelling and interesting, so I made a weird machine about it. And here's another one. This is called the possibility resolver. This is just about what it's like to be searching for something like dark matter, where we don't even know. I think it's like there's like a 8-fold magnitude difference of the options, like some huge range of how much mass dark matter particles could have. We really don't know. Like the basics are totally up in the air. So when you make a dark matter detector, you are making a very good throw of a dart, but you are throwing a dart. And the dart is going to hit a part of the possible range and not the whole thing. You can't look for all the options. It's just not possible. And so I want to embody that idea of just like not even knowing how to find out the thing that you want to find out and just throwing a dart. So this machine has a whole bunch of buttons, and you press a button and its light goes out. Or if you got the right one, it flashes and then it resets. And sometimes that happens quickly and sometimes it takes a long time. But it's fun. It has big chunky buttons. Those colorful things are actually the buttons. And it used kind of a fun material in here. So there are a bunch of kind of random numbers, which you're not really, it doesn't matter what they are, right? The numbers are irrelevant. But they are actually, in the real world, they came from the Yates compressor hall, which was where the giant compressors once ran all of the underground air tooling, because drilling was done with compressed air tools. Imagine the huge hiss of like compressed air coming off every time you changed your tool out underground. I'm sure there were ways around it, but just this like wild environment, a huge facility used to create that compressed air. And I had the incredible opportunity of being able to look around and consulting all the proper channels, I think, take a few materials and promote them to artworks. So these were asset tags that were used to label machines. And they never were used to label machines, as far as I can tell. So I used them to label this machine. And I feel very privileged being able to use these materials in this way. Here's just a little bit more of the fabrication of it. That's my CNC router engraving the text on it. This is kind of a one portion of a larger installation that will be part of the show. I'm making it this weekend, so the electronics are all ready, but I got to actually make the thing. But they're called Little Ones, which is a literal translation of the word neutrino. They're little neutral ones. And I wanted to imagine what it was like to be a neutrino, which, like, how artist of a question is that, right? Like, what is it like to be a neutrino, man? But I wondered that, like, what is it like? You're hurtling through the cosmos for billions of years, right? What is that like? So in this space, I'm gonna have about 25 of these rings hanging. And if you touch them, they light up like this. And they also cause a sort of, quote, particle collision in the ones around it. So they communicate with their neighbors using essentially Wi-Fi. And there are about 25 to 30 of them. I designed the circuit board. So this is my custom circuit board. Here's a little bit more of what that looks like. You can, if you look very closely, it's got my name on it because, I don't know, might as well sign my work. But the cool copper things here, these are actually used portions of the Lux Zeppelin dark matter detector. Thank you, Doug. These are gaskets that are used to hold vacuum. And they're crushed into this cool fitting, perfect seal once. And they can't be reused. They can be melted down and made into new ones, I'm sure. But there's just a whole lot of material. And I was lucky enough to be able to turn them into these hanging atoms. So I have a bunch of them in different sizes. These are the little ones. You get to be the little one if you wish, and come touch them. More art you can touch. And I'll just talk a little bit about the early days of spotting neutrinos, because I find this pretty wild to imagine. This is November 13th, 1970. And presumably maybe the next day or a couple days later, I'm not sure which, but a hydrogen bubble chamber in which, like, tiny particles can cause cool trails in this bubble chamber. They were constantly photographing it, like running just huge spools of film through this thing. I think they did 500,000 exposures in total. Just enormous amounts of film running through this thing. And this is the first time that they caught a neutrino with it. So this is what it was like to see a neutrino in 1970. And it's kind of wild. It looked to me like a kid's drawing. So I, of course, drew it like a kid. I drew my own version of it with charcoal and paint, and I then turned it into a slide using this amazing provider that made a slide for me. And I got an appropriate, era-appropriate-ish slide projector, also from the Spearfish Restore. It had a wild halogen bulb that said lifespan 20 on it. And I looked up what that 20 lifespan, what is lifespan 20? 20 hours. So the projector bulb lasts 20 hours. So I was like, I gotta do something about that, because we're not changing bulbs every 20 hours. So I replaced it with an LED light engine that I designed, and it has this slide in it. And so I'm replicating the experience by pointing this thing at the wall and putting chrome tape around it, what it was like to see, using film, a very, for me, like, I think nostalgically about film, but just it's wild to think about how it was not always just bits and bytes. They were physical things. And the detectors are physical things too. And so I wanted to imagine that experience and put you in that headspace. I'm also just going to talk really quickly about another artwork here. This is me after visiting the Changleska Wakan Ethnobotanical Garden, which is beautiful, and I recommend it highly to anyone, the Medicine Circle. After visiting it, I looked around a little bit and found, with the appropriate facility minding, I found some discarded material. And this particular canister kind of spoke to me. It's actually an ammunition canister, so that doesn't necessarily directly have to relate with what I understand was going on in the gold mine. It's post-World War II. I think it's from the 60s. But it's a beautiful thing, and I begged and was told that I could take it home. So I turned it into this artwork, which is called Star Stuff. In this artwork, I made a diorama imagining, or sort of showing what it's like to be in a drift within the facility, to see this minecart track and pipes and cables running all around you. And I hung a mirror inside this diorama, and then used some discarded former rail tie and some other materials to kind of form this scene. The mirror itself is very interesting. So this is in the lower foundry building, again, the gold foundry, where they were melting gold bricks down after digging up all this ore, like 1/3 of an ounce per ton or something like that of rock, just incredible amounts of energy and work, and then you end up with bars of gold, just so much happening in this one building, so much human enterprise and effort. And in the foundry building, there were lockers, and most of the lockers were completely empty, but in one, I apologize for the Blair Witch Project quality visual here, but in this dark room with lockers, I found a mirror, and it looked like this. And it's quite scuffed up and dirty, and it has an actual glass or gold coating on it. And it really spoke to me. I imagined someone going to that foundry every day and working and toiling and then just trying to see how much stuff they had on their face before they go home. And I turned it into this artwork. And so when you look into the artwork, you can crane around and see this sparkling view overhead, which is my video of Little Spearfish Creek, which I stopped down the aperture on the camera, which makes everything look like little stars. And so it's this sort of seething visual of stars moving away from your reflection. And I just kind of wanted to close by saying that this artwork really does need one more thing in it, and that is your reflection. Like without you being the person that you are, engaging with the world, being here at SURF maybe, like helping incredible amounts of research get done and helping us learn about the cosmos, or even just being a curious person looking at some artwork one day. Like this artwork needs your reflection to be complete, and I invite you all to come see it at the Black Hills State University starting on Tuesday. So I just wanted to take another moment to thank a few of the many people who've made this all possible. I know I left some names off already. I'm sure there are more, but I just wanted to take an extra moment to really thank Gina, who really made this whole thing possible. Of course, Mike, for indulging a lot of really crazy artist questions. Thank you. Doug, thank you. Jay showed me so many interesting things. Mark also, Mark Handhart has answered he's done a lot of work for me on helping tease together some sound for something, which I'll show you in person. And Matt and Stephen and Sarah and Juan and so many other folks at SURF, Kelly, so many other people who made this possible. And just a quick nod to Quentin and Michael at Black Hills State for helping me put this show together and giving me an amazing amount of studio space. So Tuesday, 5 to 7, hope to see you all there.
We've got a few minutes left. So what questions do you have for our artist in residence? Anybody? What questions might be out there to make this stir?
Maybe not a question, but wow, you've got a fantastic imagination.
Thank you. I'm honored.
And we can tell you've done a fantastic amount of research, and yeah, everything that you come up with and what your mind is going to create is phenomenal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ricky. And too, I just should point out, like, there's creativity in everything that everyone does here every day. From saying hi to me every morning a different way. So I really appreciate so many people here who are doing all this work. When I was doing science journalism online, just being able to see this output and share it with the world was such a joy. And this is a different form of the same idea, of just being able to take these ideas and share them and have people say, wow. And there's so much being done here every day that people really will say wow about.
Creativity plays such an important role in STEM. Of course, to make that leap into the unknown, you have to have that creative edge. It's the value of the Artist in Residence program that we've had at SURF now for 6 years, thanks to our partnership with Black Hills State. I need to make sure I mention that. Chris is the 6th Artist in Residence we have. Gina is here in the audience. She was our first and now coordinates the Artist in Residence program, which is open for application. So if you know any artists out there, that's open till November 1st. So
highly recommended.
But what other questions might you have about tonight's thing? Please.
So would you go back to that LZ?
Yes.
That
the copper.
the chip that you designed.
Oh yes.
Would you tell a little more about that?
Sure. So this is a combination of 2 microcontrollers, 2 small computers that are speaking in concert with each other. So they have a little conversation with each other about you and about themselves and with their neighbors too. They speak wirelessly, so just ESP32 and an AVR, a simple 18 mega. But they are building a mesh with their neighbors and saying, hello, you over there, let's chat in the future. I'd love to make your acquaintance. And they do the same and build a network among themselves. And they also know their physical location in space, just because I tell them where they are. And because of that, they can compute their neighbors physically, which is different from their network neighbors. And so based off of this, when you touch one, it sends an impulse to all of them, but each of them interprets it based off of their position. It says, I will begin my flash from that impulse 1/10 of a second, or if it's far away, a 1/2 second later. And so it's a fairly simple control algorithm. It's really just doing X, Y distance. But the actual device here is a circuit board. So one of the fun things about hobbyists making stuff on the internet these days is you can learn electronics on like a breadboard and plug in stuff together, and then take that design and lay out a circuit and get a circuit board. Just like when you open up any old device and it's got like a green thing in it or a black thing in it with all these little bits on it, you can make those just as a random unqualified nerd. It's fun. It's relatively inexpensive too, tariffs, but relatively inexpensive. And it's a superpower for an artist because I can take an existing device that has some function that I like and then change its shape. And I can choose its color, and I can make it connect to something that it was never designed to connect to. And that's kind of what's going on here. Normally you would not need to pair 2 microcontrollers together in this way. You could get the work done with one, but it's a lot easier if you do 2. So I hooked them up, and they're connected to full color LEDs, lights, and they just tell the LEDs what color to be. And the copper gasket is actually the touch sensor. So it's a capacitive touch sensing algorithm where it is comparing your electric field to the electrical field that it sees usually, how much capacitance there is. And so it's a fairly simple control scheme that's the same as the one used in your phones. So when you put your thumb on your phone, it is sensing your electric field, and it is sensing where you put your finger based off of a grid of such sensors. I'm using one sensor. The phone's a whole lot more interesting. But I'm using these copper gaskets here as large touch detectors. And the nice thing about making a huge detector like this is that it can sense before you touch it. So when you get close to it, it begins to warm. And then when you really touch it, it goes boom. Not literally, the lights go bright. It will not harm you.
And this is something you can see in person at Black Hill State Street Art Gallery on starting October 7th.
That's right.
It's going to be great. What other questions might be out there? Please.
So you were talking about, oh, it's working. You're talking about like breaking open a device and seeing the circuit board inside. In these, the circuit is pretty visible. How does that work with your aesthetic?
Yeah, good question. I feel that circuit boards can be beautiful. And in this particular artwork, I really, it's not perfect, but these circuit boards, I think I've made reasonably interesting to look at too. And I think it can be also interesting to, it's interesting to device manufacturers too. Like if you open up an Apple product, for instance, they will have a black circuit board like this one, and it'll be matte and pretty. But I guess to my mind, I do like when you can see how a machine does what it does. My artworks are not really machines per se, because like a machine does what you tell it to. And these are more like asking questions. Like they're not really like solving problems for anyone. But hopefully it's just as rewarding to see kind of exactly what is happening within the artwork and to give it that extra layer of texture. I think of like, prop shops like building like Star Wars spacecraft for the films. And they had this amazing word called greebles. Greebles is a word among like LA prop designers for extra detail that does nothing. Another word for this is steampunk, because steampunk stuff generally doesn't do things. It's cool looking gears. It's like an aesthetic. But I love when the function and the aesthetic inform each other. I hope that answers your question. I should also have thanked my wife, Rachel, who has put up with an incredible amount of late nights and weekends. So thank you.
We've got a few more minutes left. Other questions out there? Anybody else? Anything anybody wants to know? Please, yeah. We have time.
More like a comment. Recently I've been like dabbling around with one of my friend on, coding these firmware coding. And it is quite difficult. So there is a lot of work gone into this thing. I hope everybody appreciates that. it's a lot. This coding is not easy, and especially with Texas Instrument, I'm having a sweat coming down. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry to give that. Would you mind elucidating that?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, no, and I didn't want to throw too much code in the mix, but yeah, a lot of these are written with C, which is sort of a famously cantankerous programming language. It's definitely got its benefits, and one of the benefits is that you can run it on very simple computers. So in the very center of this photo of the little ones, it's still up with the copper ring. The very center, you see a rectangle and then a square, the tiny black square. That's the brain, one of the two brains. It is 16 megahertz. I'm only using it at 8 megahertz. And it can do, a little bit of simple math. It has, I think, 2 kilobytes of RAM for numbers people in the room. So this tiny thing is equivalent to the first computer I ever used, which is to say it does not have a whole lot of resources. And it is helpful to be very close to the metal, as developers call it, of using extremely challenging and difficult programming languages just to be able to get every bit, no pun intended, out of the hardware that you can. I do enjoy using simpler programming languages too. It's better, it's more fun. And you can get started with like block-based things where you're dragging visuals around, which is great for artists. But this particular project really needed to be these tiny microcontrollers. And I'm actually going to flip back a ways too to show you another one to just kind of illustrate this point. So all the way back with the tiny one, unfathomably small, right? Subatomic. This artwork, this uses a really, really, really constrained computer. So in the same time as I'm thinking about what it's like to visually see this tiny thing and reflect on the tininess of the object, I also had to code it in an incredibly confined space because I had a total of 8 kilobytes of program space. And of that, 2 kilobytes is used for the bootloader. So I had about 6 to play with. This is about 5.5. I couldn't write much more because it was full. Like, it's one sentence because that's, but just the sort of meta constraint there of like coding for this environment for me is part of the fun. But it is challenging. I would say though, as much as I appreciate the call out, thank you, it was a lot of work, not gonna lie. But if you want to get started in this stuff and you're interested, there are really nice on-ramps, and I did not jump straight into this kind of thing. I learned off of the internet, and there are such amazing resources, and I'm using the same stuff the kids learn with. So if they can do it, I can do it, right? And I would encourage anyone who's interested to like pick up like a Raspberry Pi kit or an Arduino kit. These are both made by educational nonprofits, and they're just things you can go buy. They're like 50 bucks-ish for a kit. And then you can go make your own enchanted objects. It'll take some work, but there are a lot of very visual tutorials on the internet, and I would encourage anyone to try it out.
That's fantastic. Audience, do you have any more questions? Anything else? We have one back here, yeah.
In the wave sculpture, you said that the circuit was connected and the screens were talking to each other about what they saw, which was us?
Yes.
How exactly does that work?
Oh yeah, sure. So my new work at this show, I should say, does none of the surveillance creepiness. Yeah, that is a theme that I've been kind of exploring, is the sort of effects on our world of having essentially monitoring devices on us all the time, and like how that changes things in the world. This particular one, it's a bit of a meaty metaphor. Forgive me, I'm being a little bit artist here. So it's called The Next Big Thing. At one point in my career, I was a product manager, which is to say that my job was to figure out what kind of things people wanted and what they would pay for it, whether that's in time or money, and then what it could be sold for and to whom. So identifying all those things and matching them up. So I was thinking about product design for some of my career. And I was thinking about product design with this artwork in particular because so many products launch and they either really go big or they bomb. And it's kind of like the wave, the great wave. There are fishermen in the original print. If you look really closely, there are tiny boats in the wave. And there are huddled little fisher people like in there. And you have to wonder, like, that's a huge wave. Like, did they make it out? I don't know. That's the tension of the print. It's a beautiful print. And for me, this is kind of like products too. Like, either they make it or they don't. They're distributed to you through these bubble mailers. And they often create a lot of waste, which, understand to make things consumes materials. And so this artwork kind of embodies all those things, and also tapping back into a bit about how products monitor you and monetize your data and sell what you do with them. The artwork monitors you when you approach it. So it has screens that sort of read out your distance from the artwork. It shows your face. It can recognize your face and correlate your actions in front of the artwork. It doesn't do too much with it, but I want you to wonder, in this mindset, to be like, wait, what else in the world is doing that? So sometimes I go to a dark place, sometimes not. I hope that helps.
The show Desperate Remedy Little Ones opens at the Rudell Gallery on October 7th, Tuesday night. I hope you can all make it out there. Let's give Chris Combs one more round of applause for being here this evening. And thank you all for coming out. Have a wonderful night. Our next Deep Talks event is on November 6th, so we are looking forward to seeing you all here back then.